Your gaming backlog isn't just a pile of shame anymore. At this point, it's a safety hazard. The news cycle just dumped 11 new games and a whole stack of release date updates right on top of it. So, if you're ready to see what's about to obliterate our free time, let's get right into it. But before we start, let's toss it over to a quick word from today's sponsor.
We've all played mini golf video games. You pull back an arrow, judge the power bar, and hope a spinning windmill doesn't ruin your day. But Tilt It Golf decides to take that classic formula and completely flip it on its head. Literally, instead of swinging a club, you control the entire world. There are 300 levels spread across 15 different biomes, and each biome introduces its own annoying little quirks to ruin your physics calculations. What makes it work is the speed. The levels are bite-sized and the restarts are instant. It has that classic, just one more run mentality where you fail, press a button, and you're instantly back at the start line within half a second. Best of all, it hits the digital shelves at an absolute steal of a price, just $4.99. Even better, you can snag a 20% launch discount for the first 14 days, so check out the link in the description to grab it while it's fresh. Plus, if you already own any other game from the Untold Tales catalog, they're throwing in a massive 40% owner discount to sweeten the deal.
You there, kid? It's your Uncle Lou calling. Listen, I've got
Every once in a while, a cozy exploration game comes along that nails the exact visual aesthetic and gameplay you didn't even realize you were craving, and Lou's Lagoon is looking like a prime candidate for that exact title when it drops on August 27th. The big news out of the studio is that the developers have expanded the game's launch to include a day-and-date release on the absolute newest upgraded hardware to hit the market alongside all previously announced systems, that no matter what machine is currently sitting under your TV, you are getting a first-class ticket to paradise. The setup here is incredibly charming. Your eccentric Uncle Lou has suddenly vanished into thin air following a devastating tropical storm, leaving his island seaplane delivery service entirely in your hands. You've got to hop into the cockpit, pilot your customizable aircraft through open skies and ring challenges, and fly between the vibrant islands of the Limbo Archipelago to piece together the clues behind his disappearance. To get the job done, you're armed with a ridiculous, glorious gadget called the Swirler 2000, which is essentially a weaponized, high-powered vacuum cleaner you use to suck up scrap metal, native flora, and rare crafting ingredients dropped by the local wildlife. You take those materials back to your beachside base to craft valuable goods, fulfill delivery contracts, and help rebuild eccentric local communities like the music-loving townsfolk of Gleam Reef or the grumpy sugar crystal mining creatures known as Gorplins. Between the full avatar customization, the building mechanics for your dream beach hut, and the sheer joy of just gliding over tropical waters, it feels like the ultimate virtual vacation to wrap up the end of the summer season.
Welcome to Hot Wheels.
Usually, when we hear about a highly anticipated game's release date shifting around at the 11th hour, it is a depressing, soul-crushing delay that pushes it 6 months into the next fiscal year. But the racing wizards over at Milestone just pulled an absolute power move and bumped the launch for Hot Wheels Infinite Rush up to September 10th. Yeah, you read that right? We are getting it 2 weeks earlier than originally planned, which is practically unheard of in modern game development. And look, if you played the previous games, you already know that Milestone nails the weight and physics of arcade plastic track racing, but Infinite Rush is taking the whole die-cast concept and blowing it out into a massive open-world adventure. Instead of just hot-lapping on static orange tracks, they are dropping you onto 4 huge, freely explorable islands, each ruled by an ultimate local boss called a Rush Master that you have to systematically dethrone. You start off navigating the vertical concrete jungle of Wheelswood, but then you can use a teleportation system called the Launcher to instantly snap over to the archaeological ruins of Tentacle Bay, the harsh desert factories of Gearville, or the neon-drenched cherry blossom streets of Drifty Temples. They've also added these wildly creative, free-roaming side activities that flip the script on normal racing, like Daredevil events where you hijack unique cars right out of active civilian traffic, delivery stunts where every single collision damages your vehicle and docks your pay, and stuntman modes where the literal explicit goal is to smash into as many breakable objects as humanly possible. Combine that with 4 distinct vehicle classes like the Heavy Titans and Agile Drifters, a garage roster featuring over 150 collectible cars, and a track builder that lets you snap custom tracks directly onto existing city skyscrapers, and your September calendar just got a whole lot faster. If you remember Unravel, that gorgeous, slightly emotional indie puzzle platformer starring a little guy made of red yarn, then you need to pay very close attention to Hela of Mice and Magic, because the exact same creative minds are back, and they are cooking up something incredibly special for the end of 2026. Instead of sentient string, this time around you're stepping into the tiny, furry paws of a hyper-agile mouse, serving as a witch's familiar in a lush 3D open world heavily inspired by Scandinavian folklore. The narrative hook here is genuinely heartwarming. Your kindly local witch has spent ages using her magic to quietly help out the nearby human villagers, but she has suddenly fallen seriously ill. It is now up to this tight-knit little gang of brave rodents to keep the entire witch business running smoothly, forage for ingredients, brew magical remedies, and ultimately find a cure for their sick caretaker. You can tackle this whole adventure solo, or bring a friend along for some classic local split screen or online co-op, which looks like a total blast because the entire environment runs on highly realistic physics. You're equipped with a trusty mechanical froggy backpack that acts as a glorious multi-tool to pluck berries, hoard resources, and manipulate heavy physics objects to solve environmental puzzles. But what really makes this stand out from your average cozy game is the core philosophy. It is built entirely on the concept of radical kindness, that performing good deeds for the woodland creatures and helping out the local folk actually transforms the landscape right before your eyes, clearing up corrupt areas and unlocking new paths. It's got this beautifully soothing northern wilderness aesthetic that makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket with a warm drink, and with a targeted launch window hitting in the final quarter of the year, it might just be the ultimate cozy gaming escape we need.
Let the good times roll with Once Upon a KATAMARI.
If you've ever found yourself staring at a messy room and thought to yourself, man, I really wish I could just roll all this junk into a giant sticky ball and hurl it directly into outer space to replace a missing star, then you're already intimately familiar with the glorious, unmatched absurdity of the KATAMARI franchise. The big news is that a brand new entry, Once Upon a KATAMARI, is scheduled to roll its way onto the upgraded next-gen hybrid system on October 8th, and it is bringing a massive wave of fresh content alongside a day one expansion called Rolling Live Highlights. The core gameplay here remains one of the purest forms of video game joy ever created. You start off as a tiny microscopic cosmic prince rolling a small ball that can only pick up tiny things like thumbtacks, lost coins, and dropped pieces of candy, but as the ball grows larger, the physics scaling expands until you're casually sweeping up stray dogs, screaming citizens, moving cars, and eventually entire skyscrapers and mountain ranges. The king of all cosmos is back as well, ready to look down his massive, colorful nose at you and deliver some incredibly passive-aggressive comedy lines about how your giant ball of human garbage isn't quite sparkly enough to satisfy his royal standards. What makes this new version particularly exciting on the updated hardware is the sheer processing power available. The system can now handle hundreds of individual wacky physics-based objects bouncing around on screen simultaneously without the game ever hitching, making the act of causing absolute structural chaos down in the streets feel smoother and more satisfying than it ever has before. Let's pivot away from cozy island vacations and colorful rolling trash balls for a minute to talk about something dark, punishing, and deeply atmospheric that is bound to appeal to the hardcore crowd who loves a good tactical challenge. The mysterious, dark fantasy action title The Duskbloods has locked in a massive closed network test running from August 21st to the 23rd, and if you have been eagerly waiting to see how this grim, brooding world actually handles in real time, this is your exclusive golden ticket to jump behind the curtain. These weekend network tests are always a fascinating glimpse into the development pipeline, because because it is less about marketing and way more about stress testing the structural integrity of the game's online architecture. You should fully expect a few hilarious server hiccups, but you also get the very first raw taste of the game's complex combat mechanics and netcode. The game leans heavily into slow, deliberate, and highly punishing melee combat where positional awareness, perfectly timed parries, and managing your stamina pool mean the absolute difference between victory and getting flattened by a hulking gothic monstrosity. There is a brutal multiplayer element woven into the fabric of the world as well. So during this test window, you will not only be navigating terrifying traps and giant bosses, but you will actively be dealing with other players invading your session to ruin your day. It is the ultimate test of patience and skill, and there's going to be nothing quite like the shared community comedy of getting disconnected from the server right as you're about to land the final clutch blow on a massive demon boss. So make sure you sign up early to get your hands on the build this August.
Hello,
It has been an absolute hot minute since the legendary vampire slaying franchise gave us a proper mainline 2D entry. But the massive news right now is that Castlevania Belmont's Curse is not only locked in for an October 15th launch, but the developers just confirmed the highly anticipated portable version will launch day and date alongside the heavy-hitting home console builds. For context, handheld players were originally told they'd be sitting on the sidelines twiddling their thumbs until later in the year, while everyone else got to whip Dracula's minions. So getting this parody is a phenomenal surprise just in time for the spooky season. If you haven't been keeping tabs on this one, the pedigree behind it is absolutely nuts. Konami handed the keys to the castle to Evil Empire and Motion Twin, the exact indie wizards who perfected modern side-scrolling combat with Dead Cells. You're stepping into the leather boots of Rose Belmont, the hyper-agile daughter of Trevor Belmont and Sifa Belnades, exploring a brooding, gothic 15th century Paris that has been overrun by the undead. Aside from the gorgeous, colorful, new stylized visual identity, the absolute star of the show here is the traversal. The iconic vampire killer whip has been overhauled so you can casually swing across instant death spike pits like a gothic Spider-Man, chaining together snappy wall jumps and fluid aerial dive attacks. They are also introducing an incredibly clever Arcana gameplay mechanic where defeating legendary bosses ranging from series mainstays like Medusa and Death all the way to an unhinged undead version of Joan of Arc lets you seal their souls into literal tarot cards to cast devastating magical spells. Toss in 7 distinct weapon archetypes, a heavy reliance on learning tight enemy frame patterns, and that classic, rewarding exploration map filled with breakable secret walls. And this is shaping up to be the ultimate return to form for the Belmont clan that you can fully enjoy, whether you're chilling out on the couch or desperately trying to ignore a terrible morning commute.
It has long inspired the dreams of billions.
So here is the thing. When we talk about the absolute gold standard of modern remakes, the visual style that revolutionized how we look at classic role-playing games is undoubtedly the HD 2D aesthetic, and having one of the absolute best examples of this format finally land on the latest generation of hybrid portable hardware is a massive win. Star Ocean: The Second Story R is out right now for the Switch 2, and if you missed this when it initially dropped a bit ago, you're missing out on a masterclass of how to respect a retro classic while modernizing the friction points. You get to pick between 2 distinct protagonists: Claude, the sci-fi space cadet who gets stranded on an underdeveloped fantasy planet, or Reyna, a local girl with mysterious magical healing powers, and whichever character you choose alters the narrative perspectives, the side quests, and the party members you can recruit along the way. But the real reason this game is a legendary time sink is the absolutely unhinged item creation system. The game basically hands you the keys to a digital chemistry set and says go nuts, allowing you to casually break the entire game's balancing act within the first 3 hours by accidentally forging a god tier endgame sword out of a random piece of scrap metal you found in a bush. Combine that broken crafting mechanic with a flashy real-time combat system that lets you instantly break enemy guards and chain massive visual combos, and it is just pure dopamine. Running on this new hardware upgrade, the gorgeous blend of crisp, high-definition 2D character sprites navigating beautifully rendered 3D environments looks sharper than ever, making it the absolute perfect excuse to lose 50 hours of your life while sitting on a comfortable couch.
Stab it.
Undisclosed meat chunk.
You know, that classic video game trope where you and your party march into a dungeon, slice up a bunch of terrifying monsters, steal all the gold from the chests, and just casually walk out. Did you ever stop to think about the absolute nightmare of a cleanup job you left behind for the next guys? Well, that is the exact premise behind Goblin Cleanup, and honestly, it looks like the kind of wonderfully unhinged cooperative workplace simulator that will either bond you with your friends for life or result in someone getting blocked on Discord. Think Viscera cleanup detail meets Overcooked, but you're all literal goblins running around in customized maid outfit. The big news floating around right now is that while early testers have been scrubbing floors on desktop builds for a bit, the developers just locked down a massive rollout to home consoles scheduled for 2027. You and up to 3 buddies get tossed into these massive, blood-soaked disaster zones right after a group of so-called heroes have wrecked the place. Your job is simple but deeply chaotic. You have to reset the video game level. We're talking about using an absurd gadget called a Slim-Op alongside a literal slime dispenser to wipe gallons of fresh adventure and monster viscera off the stone ceilings, manual laboring broken furniture back into its exact grid coordinates, and refilling treasure chests with shiny loot. But my absolute favorite part of the job description is that you are responsible for reactivating the deadly traps. And because friendly fire is very much a thing, you can absolutely trigger those spike traps on your own coworkers by accident. If your buddy drops dead while carrying a bucket of toxic ooze, congratulations, your chores just doubled because now you have to clean up his exploded body parts too. Toss in the fact that you actively have to keep the remaining dungeon monsters fed so they don't turn you into a mid-shift snack, and you've got a brilliant gameplay of high-stress janitorial panic. If you've been looking for a game where you can legitimately scream at your friends for failing to mop a bloodstain efficiently while fleeing a giant mimic, this massive wider release in a couple of years is absolutely something to keep on your radar.
人間とお化けによる追いかけっこゲーム「オバケイドロ2」
Asymmetrical multiplayer games usually lean incredibly hard into the dark, horrific, and gory. Think chainsaw-wielding maniacs actively chasing down screaming teenagers in the woods. But OBAKEIDORO 2, Chase and Seek, is taking that exact nerve-wracking formula, dipping it into a giant bucket of scary cute visual charm and unleashing it worldwide on August 6th. If you missed the cult hit original, the core concept here is basically a high-stakes, hyper-stylized version of childhood playground tag or cops and robbers that throws up to 8 players into frantic 3-minute rounds of pure panic. You have Team Monster facing off against Team Human. If you're playing the monster, you get insane supernatural perks, like the ability to glide straight through solid walls, trigger bursts of terrifying speed, and launch massive capture attacks to throw everyone into a central jail before the clock runs out. On the flip side, playing as a human turns the game into a chaotic survival test where teamwork is absolutely non-negotiable. You're leaping across moving platforms, pulling off daring last-second jailbreaks to rescue your captured buddies, and using your ultimate trump card, a magical lantern that emits a blinding flash to temporarily stun the monster so you can make a frantic run for it. What makes this sequel an absolute layout upgrade is its incredible versatility, offering everything from competitive online matchmaking to casual couch split screen for up to 4 people. And it even features a built-in game share system so your friends don't even need to own a copy of the game to join your local party. It is accessible enough for casual players, but packs enough clutch, down-to-the-wire tactical saves to get your adrenaline pumping, making it the perfect multiplayer palate cleanser to inject into your game nights this August.
Please remain in the vehicle.
Look, we all know the universal rule of running a dinosaur theme park. No matter how many giant concrete walls you build, and no matter how many millions of dollars you spend on high-tech security fences, some absolute genius guest is going to drop a soda can into the electrical grid. A massive tropical storm will roll in, and suddenly your star attractions are actively hunting down your paying customers for lunch. That beautifully stressful management mechanic is the entire core of Jurassic World Evolution 2, and the wizards over at Frontier are packing every single piece of content they've ever made for it into a massive complete edition hitting the Switch 2 on July 30th. Historically, trying to run a massive complex simulation game with hundreds of highly detailed physically simulated prehistoric reptiles on a mobile chipset meant your device would start running hot enough to fry an egg on, while the frame rate slowly chugged into the single digits. But thanks to this new hardware jump, you're getting the full uncompromised experience right in the palms of your hands, including every single piece of DLC. You get the massive narrative expansions from the movies, prehistoric marine reptiles like the terrifying Mosasaurus swimming in massive lagoons, and even the bizarre feathered dinosaur packs. There's something deeply hilarious about sitting on a peaceful public bus while simultaneously dealing with a complete internal security meltdown because a pack of highly aggressive velociraptors just figured out how to pick the locks on their enclosure and are currently treating your gift shop like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It is deep, it is chaotic, and having all that management strategy perfectly optimized for on-the-go play is going to make your summer commute a lot more prehistoric. Square Enix essentially struck absolute creative gold when they pioneered their signature HD 2D visual engine, creating games that look exactly like how your childhood imagination remembers old-school pixel art, but enhanced with gorgeous dynamic lighting, stunning water reflections, and cinematic camera depth. Now, the developers are doubling down on that visual nostalgia by announcing that both Octopath Traveler and its critically acclaimed sequel, Octopath Traveler 2, are making the leap over to the latest generation of hybrid hardware. If you haven't dove into these worlds yet, you're looking at a staggering, massive package of turn-based role-playing perfection that will easily clear well over 150 hours of game time. The magic of these titles is the anthology setup. Instead of one chosen hero saving the world, you follow 8 distinct characters, ranging from a noble warrior trying to reclaim his kingdom to a humble apothecary searching for a cure to a plague, each with their own unique path actions that let you interact with the world in wild ways. You can literally walk up to a sweet old grandmother in a village, have your thief character attempt to pickpocket her rare heirloom sword with a 15% success rate, fail miserably, and get kicked out of town by the local guard. The sequel, in particular, perfected the formula by adding a brilliant day and night cycle that alters your character's active abilities, and finally creating cross-path narratives where the party members actually interact with each other's personal lives, and seeing those gorgeous, glittering pixel environments pop on the upgraded high-contrast screens of this new device is going to be an absolute visual treat.
Okay everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you liked that video, please leave a like and subscribe, and ring the bell if you want to get notified when we release new content. We hope to see you in the next video.